Cynicism is just another form of cowardice. For our sergeant are not interested in a midlife crisis. We were to do our freaking work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Spotlight Podcast, Success Stories for Veterans, where it is our job to break down and analyze heavy hitters in both the military and civilian communities to discover their tactics, their mindset, and systems so that you can take those and apply them to your life. Those heavy hitters range from New York Times bestselling authors to former heads of state and to other divergent thinkers who dominate their field by challenging conventional wisdom. And today we are profiling Chuck Feeney. And we're profiling Chuck Feeney because not nearly enough veterans know about his story. Chuck Feeney is a stellar example of how to use business as a vehicle for good and positive change. Take notes.
All right.
So let's talk about some stuff, you know? Anything new in the world? Anything going on that we need to be aware of before we jump into this conversation about Chuck Feeney?
I mean, my friends and I have been discussing the Jordan Woods, Khloe Kardashian, but I'm guessing that's not where this podcast goes.
I mean, there might be an applicable lesson there.
Not really. No, let's just go. That's really what's happening in the world right now.
You know, I'll take a shot at how that might be relevant. I personally think that type of stuff is part of the reason when we get out, right? And you transition out of the military and you listen to the stuff that people talk about and care about and pay attention to, and you're like, you simple people. What is going on? And I'm not trying to make us, sound arrogant, but I've had that thought many times.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is what you pay attention to?
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not better than anybody else because, quite frankly, every time I'm at the checkout stand at the grocery store, let's be honest, I look at the covers of all those gossip magazines. Like, oh, really? Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are getting back together and divorcing again. And, I'm just like, oh, wow. It's a statement of America that I just find offensive. But
It's okay.
It is interesting. But let's talk about American that isn't offensive.
Okay.
Chuck Feeney.
Chuck Feeney.
And before we get into this, I just there's some statistics that I think preface this conversation very well. Because Chuck Feeney, the man was an entrepreneur, absolutely incredible, gave most of his fortune away. And we'll jump into like how that actually occurred. But before we get into that, I want to talk about veterans in business specifically.
Yes.
And here's why. Because we don't get any credit for service as a veteran in the business world. What I mean by that is people are always like, oh, well, you need to translate. You need to translate your experience. And I've come to the conclusion that the rest of the world needs to translate itself to us. Because,
very true.
All right, let's look at some data points.
I'm down with data.
Okay. According to Census Bureau data, this is where most of this is coming from, the Census Bureau data, 9.1% of all U.S. businesses currently are majority owned by veterans. That represents $1.14 trillion in total annual revenue. Total GDP for the U.S. right now, roughly, depending on what you read, 19.39 trillion. So 5% of the U.S. economy is generated currently by U.S. veterans, right?
Okay.
Now, those businesses employ over 5 million Americans, which is responsible for roughly $195 billion in payroll, right? Mm-hmm. So we're pumping $195 billion into payroll back into the economy.
Veterans, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Veterans. These veteran-owned businesses.
Okay.
12.8% of those are in the finance and insurance industries, right? So not like these, like everybody, I think, talks a lot about like veteran T-shirt companies, and that's
the Black Rifle Coffee Company.
Yeah, exactly. And I love those guys, and I'm not knocking those because they're great companies.
Yes.
But it's not all this, very basic type of business. Mm-hmm. We're talking about some advanced stuff like finance and insurance that's heady stuff. It's not just like this amateur, I started my little hot dog stand. No, it's big stuff.
When you mentioned some of this to me, I was looking at Forbes' 10 most successful veterans businesses, and Black Rifle Company was on there, but pretty much 9 9 out of the 10 of them were all IT related, basically, and financial related. And they're all doing major things in the insurance company. They're setting up job searches, job placements. They are successful. They're not just, restaurants. These are smart individuals doing this.
Exactly. What's even more surprising, not to me, but I think to other people, 85.3% of these are founded companies. Now, why is that important? Founded versus unfounded means, we aren't inheriting this via family wealth or, dynastic wealth or anything like that. We're starting these generally as a population. We're coming up with these business ideas and getting them off ground level. So that's very important. However, and this is what I find as a very alarming statistic, according to the Census Bureau data, 26% of veterans want to start a business, but only 6% do. And according to some articles that I read surrounding the subject, that's largely due to the fact that veterans find themselves shut out from capital. Now, the subtext that I'm going to put into this, in my personal belief, and there's no data or anything to back this up, this is purely me speculating, is because of what we were talking about before in the pilot episode of bad branding. I don't think that people see veterans as a surefire bet. Now, let's contrast that to post-World War II, right? In 1945, 49% of all returning veterans went on to own or operate a business, right? And that was followed by one of the biggest periods of economic boom in American history, right?
Okay.
The 1950s. Now, part of that is because we were rebuilding Europe and Japan and all of that. So there was a lot of money being thrown around. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of opportunities to do this. But you still had that concept, and you had these veterans going out and doing these things, and contrast that to today, where we only represent 5% of the U.S. economy. Now, even bigger, why does this matter to veterans as a whole, right? We need to understand that value, right? That military training that you have, or just the concept or the connections that you have from that, the social capital the veterans have is massive, and we're not using it, right? More importantly, veterans currently only make up 7.6% of the U.S. population, right? Half of that 7.6% is beyond retirement age, right? So roughly about 3.5 to 4% of the American economy, of the American population, is actually veterans in the working age. Yeah. They can actually do this stuff, but we represent 5% of the U.S. economy. That's impressive.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
I don't know that any other demographic can boast that type of result.
That was my question. I was going to ask you. I was like looking at that small population and then looking at the 5%. I mean. Yeah.
And so where that really concerns me is that a lot of times as an individual veteran, you're forced to accept this traditional, the nonsense of conventional wisdom of transitioning out, that you need to somehow leave the military behind you and move into the civilian world because these are the people who do it right. These are the people you need to learn from. And that's not intrinsically wrong, but I think it's a very glossy view of what civilian employment actually looks like. So, and I know this because I've been the past 5 years, I've dedicated to finding veteran success stories and seeing these people that are doing these things. And I was like, wow, there's a very inaccurate picture being painted here. So that is why I believe we need to look at people like Chuck Feeney. And Chuck Feeney, I've never heard of him before. I randomly found this book on a bookshelf one day in Anchorage, Alaska. Anchorage, Alaska. I was just going through like a used bookstore, and I was just like, oh, hey, The Billionaire Who Wasn't. That's an interesting book title. And start flipping through and okay, here's this, former Air Force radio operator.
That's cool.
Right? And that's the other component is I think a lot of times, even amongst ourselves as veterans, like they think I didn't win a Medal of Honor or I wasn't a SEAL or I wasn't a general, there's no hope.
No. Yeah.
Right. That nobody's going to take you seriously. It's so far off. Right. He was just a general enlisted guy in the Air Force, radio operator, didn't have to see combat. Eventually ranked the 23rd richest person in the world.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's so cool.
By Forbes.
And nobody knows him.
And nobody knows about him.
No.
In the entire United States it looks at people like Steve Jobs as the Messiah. Yes. Right? This is the prophet. This is the person that you need to be like. And I'm no, Chuck Feeney, because Chuck Feeney Katie, gave away his fortune. So he had so
Yes.
much money that he was still able to keep $5 million in cash, plus an additional like $35 million in assets, which is no small amount of change. But compared to what he gave away, chump change.
How long was he in the
He
service
was
for?
only in for 4 years, 4 or 5
So
years.
in 4 years,
Yeah.
he just did his, initial 4 like everybody
Exactly.
did, and then got out
Got
and was
out.
just successful.
Exactly.
Because, that's interesting. When I was looking at Forbes and I was reading the one depressing thing that, when I was reading the Forbes top 10 most successful veteran businesses, they're all men. And so women, we got to get out there and we got to make our mark because it's International Women's Day the day we're recording this. So let's step up our game because we can be successful. But
Katie
that's
will fight you.
Side note, they're all men. And a majority of those ones who started all these businesses on Forbes are special forces guys. So it's super interesting. Special forces guys and officers were a lot of the ones who started a lot of these successful businesses. And so it's super cool to hear that just a guy who's like one of us,
Yep.
like the blue collar working force. That's not to say special force is not blue collar working force. So please, anybody who's special force listening, don't take offense to that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the person who's wiping up oil at the end of the day is creating a super successful business and nobody knows about him because he's, I'm guessing, a very humbled man.
So what's interesting, and I'll go into his background a little bit. So he was born into an Irish Catholic family.
Oh,
which
good. Fits him perfectly
Jersey,
here.
in New Jersey in 1931. So he's born in the Great Depression, right?
Oh, wow.
Right in the
Yeah,
middle of it, right?
In New Jersey.
In New Jersey.
Okay.
Yep. So,
Super Jersey accent, I'm guessing.
I don't know.
Oh, man.
I never heard him say. I would assume so.
people
I
from
don't
Jersey.
know how you could get away with
I know.
not having it. Apparently, but the guy was very charismatic.
Yeah.
Chuck was very charismatic, and his dad used to walk him to the library, and he was the type of person. So there's a story, and I'm pulling a lot of this from the book, The Billionaire Who Wasn't. So I highly recommend this book for anybody who's out there listening to this. Get this book. Read through it and understand this man, because we're not going to have time to go through the whole book, and it's a fantastic read. It's a very good how-to map on how to actually do the legwork behind running a business that frequently doesn't get discussed.
Put the title and his name and everything in the show notes.
Yeah,
so
we'll
if
put
you
that
wanna
in the
look-
show description, so if you guys want to look at it, I highly recommend it. I think this is mandatory reading for any veteran who wants to be an entrepreneur. This man needs to be your gold standard, in my
Side note,
opinion.
I have not read this book, so don't feel bad if you haven't heard of it.
I'm schooling everybody up. So.
Oh, gosh.
So he got kicked out of kindergarten
No,
for being cheeky, right?
cheeky.
For being cheeky. And
Explain your definition of what cheeky
So
is.
cheeky, the way I take it, is kind of like the British definition of it. You're just kind of sarcastic. You're a witty kid. You're just
okay.
talking a little,
So he's spunky.
Yeah, exactly. Spunky would be like a good translation. So he started his entrepreneur. This is the type of kid he is, and this maintains this general demeanor maintains throughout his life. He's kind of known for being this kind of taking jabs at people. So he fit in great in the military because it's military culture. In my opinion, is just talking a little bit of shit. And
That's how you get through your day.
Exactly.
Yep.
So he started his entrepreneurial endeavors by selling Christmas cards door to door.
Like his own
as
made?
a kid. I don't know if he made them, or I think he sold them from a catalog, something along those lines.
So, I'm sorry, like Adam Sandler. Wasn't Adam Sandler in the movie when he gets all that
Mr.
money?
Mr. Deeds,
Mr.
he
Deeds.
writes Hallmark cards.
Hallmark
So he started writing Hallmark cards.
Okay, go back
how
to
it
it.
feels to be in love. Yeah, so he's helping the mailman post letters close to Christmas time because there's apparently a lot of work to done. And mind you, he's hustling in the 1930s as a kid, like early 1940s. So he's really, he needs a dime is important to his family.
Yeah.
And he was also helping people clear driveways. So really just whatever he could do, wherever the money was to be made, he would just go to it. He was just looking for opportunities. He was looking for gaps in service, which is fundamental entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
It's fundamental. Okay. Why that's important is you see that a lot more in veterans, is that desire to do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we need to harness. And if you do it the right way and you look for those gaps, people will celebrate you for going in and filling that need. So there's a critical difference, though, between Chuck Feeney and what I see a lot of veterans doing now. Chuck Feeney was referred to in his hometown as the mayor because he knew everybody and he talked to everybody.
Okay.
I see a lot of veterans who are getting out and becoming antisocial.
Very much
You
so.
cannot do that. I don't care if you don't like other people. You aren't required to like anybody.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to just be an angry, pissed off dickhead.
Because then you're adding to that, the characteristics of what the population, the civilian population, thinks of a veteran right now. Exactly. So you're adding to that. Yeah.
Exactly. And all you're doing is creating heat in your own life, right? You're just creating heat and friction in your own life for no benefit, and you're closing the door on opportunities, because the reason Chuck Feeney ends up running a worldwide, duty-free, multi-billion-dollar industry is because he was well liked by other people, even people he was not friends with, and he knew about opportunities because he talked to people. Put this in the aspect of a video game. I know so many veterans who are video gamers, and you'll play these massive multiplayer online role-playing games.
Absolutely.
And you'll talk to anybody in the world, in that world.
Absolutely.
You'll follow
no matter what age they are.
Exactly. You'll follow all these little side trails. But when it comes to your real life, you don't take the same approach. That's madness to me. Like that's a gigantic mistake. So Chuck Feeney taking that approach and just talking to everybody, you don't know what's going to shake out.
Right.
And everybody wants to force feed themselves like, I'm going to do this one thing. I'm like, the best way to do business is to see what's there. That's what Chuck Feeney did differently. He didn't try to fit the world into his mold of the business he wanted to create. He looked at the world and said, what is needed and how can I help? That is the critical difference between Chuck Feeney and so many other business professionals.
Right.
So many. And that's why, quite frankly, why Steve Jobs was good. Steve Jobs was a dick, though. Right? That's a well-known fact.
Yeah.
And
I mean, thank God for Steve Jobs, let's be honest.
He's a great marketer.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you look back at, if you're Chuck Feeney on your deathbed, or if you're Steve Jobs on your deathbed, if you're looking at the mortality of this, who would you rather be? I choose Chuck Feeney.
Right.
100% of the time.
Veteran or not.
Veteran or not, I would choose Chuck Feeney, but especially Chuck Feeney because he's a veteran. That's the person I want to be.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I would rather be known for being this person who gave it all away, and he still secured his family's dynastic wealth, right? So his family's taken care of for forever because he made the money and he kept some of it, right? Which is appropriate. I don't think anybody gets upset about that.
No.
But he didn't keep billions of dollars that he didn't need.
Yeah.
Right? So that is the crux of Chuck Feeney. Anyway, so after he graduates from high school, that's when he joins the Air Force, and he tried to join early.
So he got back into kindergarten, right? After he got kicked out? Okay,
I'm assuming so. He ended up graduating from kindergarten.
Good.
I don't have the details there, but I'm assuming he did.
Okay, good.
So goes on to be a radio operator and is sent over to Japan as part of the occupying force.
Clear that up.
Air Force.
Air Force, okay.
Air Force radio operator. So he's sent over to Japan.
And he was born in the 30s?
Yeah.
And 31. The Air Force was started in
Brand new.
1946, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's when it actually split off from the Army. Yeah.
So he joined it fresh.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Cool.
Exactly. And
Very
he actually tried to sign up early and go early, but apparently he tried to go and the car wouldn't start, so he had to wait his turn. But that's back when conscription was still happening. So his mindset, according to the book, was that he was going to have to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. Instead of just sitting there with his thumb up his ass for 3 years, he figured he'd just go ahead and do it.
Cool.
And this is where his eyes were open to the bigger world, and where he started to see that there's more outside of New Jersey.
Right.
And where he started to get his big thinking. And that's another critical difference between him and Chuck, in other, one, even veterans sometimes, and two, just the general population of the United States. Everybody's got this crab in the bucket mentality, like, don't think too big, don't think too big.
Right.
And for him, going to Japan was this eye-opening experience. And I had a very similar sensation when I went to Japan. I ended up on Okinawa. It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was
kind
incredible.
of opened up your mind.
I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, middle of nowhere, red dirt, Oklahoma. I didn't know about any of this. And I'm not trying to say that Oklahoma is devoid of culture.
Oh,
but
it's okay. You can say that.
It's a million miles away from Japan as far as culture.
So you're kind of saying that, maybe everybody should step out of their box and kind of go internationally, see other cultures, see how eye-opening it is, get out of your safe space here that you have, not safe space, but your comfy space. And
you have to.
Yeah.
You have to. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right.
Right. And when a lot of veterans retreat from society and cut themselves off, it's because they're uncomfortable because they don't fit in.
Right.
Can't do that.
And
you must not do that.
And the big thing that you see too is a lot of the veterans that you talk to, they say when they get out of the military is they want to find that community that they had in the military. But the problem is they're looking for other veterans who are out there to create that community instead of seeing what they have similar with other folks. Maybe, y'all like to crochet or I don't know, watch NASCAR.
Exactly.
Get together with those who are out there, get uncomfortable, and you never know what could happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's that kind of the fear of exposure. And it comes for different reasons. Different veterans have different reasons for it, but it all kind of manifests in the same way as I'm going to sit on my couch and not leave my house.
Right.
Well, the question is, are you an ambitious veteran or are you just the veteran that's going to sit around and wait to die? Because if that's what you went through all of that for, and if that's what you want, by all means, do it. I personally don't recommend it because I think that is going to put you in that place of depression. And my main takeaway from this is hold on to that big thinking and that fire that got lit when you first went into the military. This big expansive universe opened up for you. And hold on to some of the bad stuff, right? Allow that to drive you. One of the things that Chuck Feeney had happened to him, so the Korean War kicked up while he was in Japan. And he was just a radio operator before, doing some pretty mundane tasks. And then it got serious because he had to start trying to intercept communications from the Russians so that they could coordinate. And one night he's on duty doing whatever it is that he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's listening over the radio to an American plane that has crossed this, the line. I don't know what they call the line, but basically you're not supposed to go beyond this line. And I don't know if you call that the line of demarcation or whatever.
Okay.
Because if you do, you're going to get shot down. Right. Okay. It was an established no fly.
Where at?
Limit in this above the Korean Peninsula somewhere. Okay. I don't know specifics on that.
Gotcha.
Well, this pilot had two language specialists in the aircraft with him. So it's some type of recon, I'm assuming. Anyway, Chuck's on the radios. And this pilot goes past the line only for 5 minutes, gets shot down by the Russians. And, Chuck Feeney's listening to them scream over the radio as they're going down. And that stayed with him.
He's probably young too at this time hearing this.
Yeah, exactly. So, late teens, early 20s, I'm assuming early 20s. And, that horrific experience. What's even worse about it is those language specialists worked in the building with him. Like he had just been on duty with him the night before.
Yeah.
So it was a direct impact. And he came back to the United States and he visited with the families of the two people that did that. But
that's rough.
So it's an earth-shattering experience just in terms of your reality when you're confronted with mortality. But Chuck Feeney held on to that, right? You don't have to get rid of that, nor do you have to let it poison you for eternity, right? So he utilized that. So when he was thinking about his next steps, he took a big one because I don't know if it was derived from some sense of duty to the people who didn't come back. And, you're like, well, I've heard veterans describe it like this, and, like, I have to do something big because other people didn't get that opportunity. And now I'm living for 3 people. Now I'm living for 4 people, kind of like how pregnant women say I'm eating for 2. It's kind of the same mentality.
Right.
So what did he do?
I don't know. What did he do?
I'll tell you.
Did he start up a radio company? I don't know.
So his next step, so you got to, again, context, he's, an Irish Catholic from New Jersey coming out of the Great Depression from a family with not much money.
Yeah.
He's got a GI Bill now, right? GI Bill scholarship. Gonzaga. No, he does not. He does not end up at Gonzaga. And that something like that would have been what they would have preferred, right? They wanted him to go to Seton Hall. Right, which is a small Catholic university.
All right, at basketball.
He applies to Cornell.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that is everybody, and there's a quote from the book that I absolutely love because I think it exemplifies why he did that. So this is on page 11 for anybody that cares to follow along. So he
put in the show notes.
His dad's friend was nervous that the young Feeney might be aspiring too high in seeking admission to a major Brahmin establishment. And you also see that his sisters were thinking the same thing. So everybody around him, when he gets back, is advising him, like,
not to apply there?
Yeah, you're reaching too high. Just to go to Cornell, right? Just to go to Cornell. And
they can't get over him getting kicked out of the kindergarten, I'm guessing. That's why.
I guess not. So he basically did his own thing. And when he got to Cornell...
So he got accepted.
He got accepted.
Look at that.
Got in.
Yeah.
Right?
Fantastic.
Because he was smart and he applied to the School of Hotel Management, which had the lowest SAT requirements, but
Get you
also was producing the most, most high profile entrepreneurs coming out of it. So he's like, yeah, I want to do that. That sounds cool.
Right.
I'm going to do it. And he did, and he got in.
Cool.
And everybody was blown away.
That's cool.
You know, all these people are like, oh, don't get your hopes up.
Right.
I hate that. You see that crap so much. I can't tell you how much transition advice I've seen that tells people, mitigate your expectations. Like, you're not going to start managing a company right away. And like, you don't know that. You don't know that. You might have the skills that somebody desperately needs.
Did you kind of experience that at all? Like with you applying for, your graduate law, anything like that? Did you experience the same kind of like you're aiming too high?
Not within my group. I carefully cultivate a group of people that think big because I cannot stand it when people tell you. But I have talked to a lot of veterans who have experienced that. Yeah. And I'm fortunate. My father was an entrepreneur. My brothers both entrepreneurs.
Cool. So it runs in your blood.
Yeah, exactly. It runs in my family to do that. And it's not outside of the norm. My father-in-law runs his own law practice. It's not anything that I've had to deal with, but I've read it and I'm like, that is absolutely false.
Right.
Do not believe that. I want to scream through my computer monitor, like, no, don't listen.
Yes.
Don't listen because they're, you need to translate this and, don't aim too high. And, I've even seen people suggest that when you're negotiating your salary that you should come in with something reasonable. I'm like, no, you need to peg the high end of the market and justify it. And then add value, go a completely opposite direction. And that's what Chuck Feeney was doing. So gets to Cornell. I love this dude. I absolutely love this dude. Because again,
you're very excited and I like it.
He is looking for opportunities that exist right now. Where is the gap? What is already here? Because that is the path of least resistance. What market already exists that isn't being served? So he becomes known as the sandwich man.
Oh my gosh.
So
somebody's making sandwiches out of his dorm room.
Yes, he is.
I'm so excited right now.
So he's in Ithaca. And mind you, he's on the GI Bill. He still doesn't have a lot of money because the GI Bill.
Remind me where that's at.
It's in New York.
Okay, good.
He's not making a ton of money off the GI Bill. Right? It's not like it is now where you get a monthly stipend or anything like that.
Right.
So he still needs to hustle money. So he sees that there's no Wendy's and there's no McDonald's in Ithaca. Mm-hmm. But you have this entire group, this entire university of people who, they went to prep schools. They all have cars. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, they have disposable income. So they're also hungry late at night.
Yes.
I'll make sandwiches. Sell it to him.
That's so dope.
Starts crushing it. Then
so great.
His a buddy of his.
Is he known for any type of sandwich?
I don't know. Okay. It seems to me like it was mostly ham and cheese.
Okay.
Right? Late night ham and cheese, easy to make. He was
going.
He was even breaking down like I'll go light on the ham. Put in the bread. He standardizing
and you're right.
his manufacturing process.
He's doing this out of his dorm room, right? Is that what you said? Oh, that is so cool.
Or wherever he's living, and he's like employing people to do it for him so that he can manage his time better. Because he also was helping his friend sell programs at the football stadium because his friend got the concession from the university to do that at the football stadium. So he's constantly hustling. He's just seeing what's there. And what's interesting about him is he's starting a bunch of little micro businesses.
Cornell doesn't have programs for their football games.
Well, not back then. We're talking about the 1950s. Yeah.
Okay, but he's creating opportunities for his friends, which is
exactly.
So he's not thinking just about himself. He's thinking about those around him and how to make them successful as well. That's such a great person. Yes.
The man was always finding win-win scenarios, and he found them by talking to people.
Very cool.
He found them by talking to people. I cannot emphasize that enough.
And so all those businesses that he helped his friends create were kind of ones that they had in mind, and he wanted to help them succeed, or he came up with those ideas and passed them on to his friends. Both. Okay.
People would present him with ideas constantly throughout his time as a professional, and he would listen. Okay. And he would evaluate.
Okay.
Is there something there? So he's doing this Cornell thing. He eventually graduates. Now he's like, I don't know what to do.
And he graduated with this hotel management.
And he was first generation to go to school. Big deal for him.
Right.
Well, he decides to go to Europe. Why? He heard that education was free in France. So he's like, I'm going to go to France and get a free education. And he did. As he's doing that, and I think that this is the best example of entrepreneurial spirit that I've heard throughout the entire book. And it's almost a throwaway within the book. He decides he wants to travel.
Okay.
Well, back then, apparently there was a lot of hitchhikers and everybody had signs and everybody was trying to backpack. And, everybody would write a sign with their destination on it.
Okay.
And initially it was very difficult for him to get rides. What does this man do? This man is brilliant.
What did he do?
This man is absolutely brilliant. His sign says, free English conversations offered. Gets all the rides he can. He's always getting rides now.
Free English conversations offered.
Yes.
So what?
Because he's in France, right? And there's people driving through France who want to talk to somebody in English.
Because they want to better their English or what?
Any number of things. And maybe they're a British citizen going through France and they want to talk to somebody who speaks English. Maybe there's somebody French who wants to talk to somebody who speaks English.
Wow.
There was a lot of American GIs still
true.
in Europe.
I would never think to put that.
I wouldn't either.
No.
Brilliant.
That's so crazy.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
he saw a market there and he's like, I can exploit this. And it was a win-win. He gets where he needs to go. Mm-hmm. And he gives something to somebody that they didn't even know they wanted until they saw it and they're like, I do want that. Right? Think about the students at Cornell. They don't even know that they want a sandwich late at night until it's offered to them, but they did want it and he knew it. And he knew it because he would talk to people.
Yes.
Right? And that is how he found all this information. While he's doing all of that, he's seen all these Navy dependents around Europe, right? Because he's going up and down the coast and he's seen that they don't have anything to do during the summer. What's his next move? He starts a summer camp for Navy kids.
Okay. I mean,
and he starts meeting a ton of people because he's on the beach and he's got this gaggle of kids behind him. And he's apparently a pretty decent looking guy as a young man. So that didn't hurt, right? And he's charismatic.
So he's got
and he was in shape. Yeah, exactly. So people would engage him. They were just fascinated by this guy because he's just always doing something.
What do you do? Like a summer camp for him? Just have him do activities and things like that?
He would just basically watch him play on the beach.
Okay, daycare kind of thing.
Totally free. No overhead. Well, no, he wasn't doing it for free.
Oh, I was like,
no,
what?
But he had no overhead in this business. Again, it was a smart little micro business to serve a niche of people.
Yeah.
And especially in Europe at that time, they had a disposable income, right? Because you could live like, even as an enlisted person, aristocracy in Europe at that time. Because Germany was dealing with hyperinflation and all of that. Absolutely brilliant man.
That's crazy.
Brilliant man.
Yeah.
That is where, as he's traveling through Europe, where he meets the person that's going to change his life, in Bob Miller, and that's where he finds this opportunity for the duty-free stores.
Back up real quick. Did he you said he went to France for a free education. Did he end up getting another education while he was over there?
Yeah, he did. And he made so much money that he was actually thinking about going to a German institution to learn.
Was he trying to learn German or something, or?
He just liked learning.
Do you know what his education was that he picked up in France at all?
I don't. I don't remember off the top of my head.
That's all right. I'm just curious.
He's just learning stuff, and he just thought it was brilliant.
So he's a lifelong learner.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Which is also key. And not that you need to go to a university to learn, and certainly not anymore. But
you can learn everything online.
The guy was just following opportunity as it presented itself. Yeah. So that's what he was doing.
Sorry, go back to the spot you were at.
So he's got the duty-free thing going on, and how he finds it.
Can you just explain real quick if somebody doesn't know what duty-free means?
I will try.
If you haven't been to borders and airports, I mean, do you know what they are?
I would assume that most of the veterans listening to this have experienced some type of duty-free. But if you don't know,
but for our non-veteran listeners
it's tax-free goods.
Okay,
effectively is what it is, and it's tax-free due to the nature of treaties. If you're coming, and it's don't quote me on this. And I'm going to butcher this because I'm not super up on duty-free myself, but it's basically an avoidance of an import tax.
Okay.
So you can buy booze abroad, send it back to yourself, and because basically nobody knows whose responsibility it is, I guess, there's duty-free associated with it, i.e. duty equaling tax, no taxes. So you can avoid that. So at the time, you could, and I probably still, you would know better than I would, you couldn't drink on the ships.
No.
You couldn't have booze on board.
No.
But you could purchase and send it back to the United States. Mm-hmm. And that's what he was doing, is he was going on ships based on pure charisma, getting his way past, the officer of the deck and all that, and taking orders from the sailors on board.
Shut up.
And he was also arguably getting confidential information from the sailors themselves about where they're headed next. And, he's just meeting them all around the ports of Europe.
They just allowed him on the ship to just, what?
Yeah. He was that good.
Blowing my mind.
He was
right
that
now.
good. And I personally don't know the significance of it. I know it's not easy to get on a ship.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, right now in this day of age, it's impossible unless you have a certain clearance and you have to be associated with that ship
and
in
it's
some
probably
way.
because of guys like Chuck Feeney, right? But the man saw an opportunity, started hustling, and everybody loved him because the sailors get what they want.
Yeah.
He gets what he wants.
Wow.
Right? Setting up win-wins. A lot of times I see, I will talk to any type of business owner, but especially veteran-owned businesses. In a lot of cases, they're wanting to set up these very adversarial businesses. No. You want to stay away from that. You want to play in the blue ocean, not the bloody red one. You want to play in the blue ocean.
It's amazing that you just spoke about that because I just had that conversation last week about blue oceans and red oceans. So
yeah,
you're
reading that, but that's a good book.
It's
Blue
fantastic.
Ocean Strategy is a fantastic book.
So he's thinking blue ocean right now.
Yeah, he's just seeing what market exists is 1950s,
50s?
1960s, and then the duty free shows up, and that's when it blows up. And I'll bypass that entire conversation because the DFS conversation. You just have to jump in and read the book to understand how that all works. Because, it was a serious, complex web of decisions go on.
Right.
What's more important is what happens on the back end. It's why he continued doing it. It's because he wanted to help people, and he wanted to use this wealth for something. And as he goes on, he becomes more and more upset with his business partner, Bob Miller, because Bob Miller becomes a fan of conspicuous consumption and buying expensive stuff just for the sake of buying something expensive, and these ostentatious acts of giving where he's like, oh yeah, I gave it away. And, his name's written all over the building. Chuck Feeney didn't do any of that. So from his time in the Air Force and being a radio operator, because he had so much secret information, he kind of developed this air of secrecy about him. And so he decided that he wanted to run his philanthropic endeavors the same way. And so he goes through just a gigantic pain in the ass process of setting up this trust in Bermuda and all of this background on how to get this thing set up because it hadn't been done before.
Right.
Because nobody had wanted to give away this amount of money. That was critical because I talk to a lot of veterans who want a mission, right? They can't get up in the morning to just go make money or make profits for a company. It just doesn't connect, right? There's no soul to that.
Right.
Chuck Feeney understood that. And so he went, and that's what became his why. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Because I'm going to give it all away. And I'm going to send it where I want it to go versus where the tax man wants it to go versus where every other person who's trying to hit me up for money wants it to go. And so he went through an enormous process.
Why did if his business partner was doing business practices that he didn't totally agree upon, then why did he choose to have Bob Miller, right?
Yeah, Bob Miller.
Why did he choose to have Bob Miller as his business partner?
So Bob Miller and him met at Cornell.
Okay.
And they discovered this, and Bob Miller was in Europe working
Was he the football programmer?
I don't believe he was.
Okay.
But Bob Miller was in Europe at the time, and when Chuck Feeney first heard about this idea from somebody else and said, hey, but you want in on this? We need some help. And that's how it happened.
Okay.
And it wasn't so much that Bob Miller's business practices were off as his personal use of his money that they were making from this gigantic thing that becomes DFS, duty-free shops. And that is where Chuck Feeney and him started to separate over time.
Okay.
And one thing is choose your business partner wisely. Because it's very much a marriage over time. So he wanted to do that, and that's what drove him long term, was to keep making money and driving at things that he thought was important. And he amassed just an incredible amount of money just to get rid of it. And that is so incredible to me. And the takeaway is there's so many takeaways, but one, think big.
Yeah.
Two, understand your value. Don't worry about what other people around you are telling you can or cannot do so much that it impedes you from going after what you actually want.
Right.
And ignore conventional wisdom. Right. Conventional wisdom in this case, if he would have listened to everybody, he would have been at Seton Hall. He wouldn't have met Bob Miller. They wouldn't have started DFS. None of this would have been possible. He might not have gone to Europe. He would have stuck around, made the smart decision. Smart is typically the way when people are talking about making the smart decision, they're not talking about making the best decision. out of an array of options. They're talking about taking the safe,
Right.
the safe route.
Yeah.
The safe route rarely nets you any type of big gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying be cavalier with your money, because one thing that Chuck Feeney did exceptionally well was plan. He was an exceptional planner. So there's a difference between being safe versus planning,
Right.
right? He was taking calculated risks constantly. At one point, he even got himself in trouble with the New Jersey mob when he was a kid, because he was selling umbrellas on the boardwalk
Fantastic.
as a concession stand.
Yeah.
And then like the mob would allow people, their pass was a ribbon. And what he would do is he'd cut those ribbons in half and then sell them. So he got himself in a bit of trouble. And he was young, so he didn't get his fingers broken or
That's
anything.
so
But
amazing.
the guy's just incredible.
He's like, I'm an Irish Catholic man.
Yeah, and you don't hear about him. To me, that's mind blowing.
Can you, when you say that he gave some of his money away, did he give it away to people or organizations? What did he do?
All the above. So he donated a lot to Cornell.
Okay.
Specifically, he donated a lot to scholarships for
cool.
students to be able to afford to go to an Ivy League college.
Yes.
So students like himself,
Right. Right.
without means to do it. For a lot of people, the GI Bill and a lot of veterans, the GI Bill is the only reason they're ever going to be able to go to college, myself included.
Yeah, me too.
I went to a very swanky private institution because of the GI Bill for my undergrad. Because of that, right?
Yeah.
Because the GI Bill was there. I also got an MBA out of the deal, and I'm paying for law school now, but I got a great scholarship because I was able to do undergrad without pressure. I was able to do my MBA without pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And now here I am. There's actually a lot of veterans in the law school. So if we have more of that mentality being pushed out, I think that it lifts all veterans up.
Right.
But we have to stop believing the nonsense that's associated with this conventional transition wisdom.
Right.
We must, because it's bad advice.
So what you're saying is not all veterans who get out should become cops.
Yeah, you don't, and if you want to, you want to.
You hear that, right?
Yeah, if you want to, you want to, but you don't have to be a cop. You don't have to be a firefighter.
Because that's what society's telling you. When you get out, they're like, oh, so you're going to become a cop or you're going to become this, this, and this. And don't listen to that. If you don't want to, we're not saying not to become that. If your goal is to get out and protect the community that you live in, be a cop. If that's what you want to do, but don't think that just because you were in, you can only fit these molds, you can do what you set your mind to and think open. It's crazy that, he was thinking of the blue ocean, red ocean mentality that long ago, because now, it's emerging again. Now people are like, oh, how can I find the blue ocean now, Yeah. And so I just think that's crazy. He was thinking already that far ahead that long ago, because it was kind of long ago. It was a different world back then,
the 50s and 60s when it all started, that's almost 70 years ago at this point.
I mean, the 40s is when a lot of automobiles are finally decent ones are coming out.
Exactly.
Think about that time frame.
An automobile with a windshield and a closed cab. Yeah. Just phenomenal. And it is a question of defining what you want. Chuck Feeney knew what he wanted. And what he wanted was excitement. What he wanted was freedom. A lot of times you ask people, what do you want? And they don't know how to answer that question. And the guy that I look to a lot, Tim Ferriss, defines it, what would excite me? What can you get excited about on a day-to-day basis? Right. If that's going to being a cop, great.
Yeah, definitely.
If that's being a firefighter, if you want to run into a burning building, so be it.
We need them.
If you want to start a company or you want to go to the top of an organization, do that. Shoot for that. Do not settle just because somebody told you, oh, well, you have to wait your turn.
Right.
I'm telling you, most people in the civilian sector don't educate themselves past college.
Right.
You can look at an industry, read the top 3 books on that industry from Amazon. Just read the books. Dissect the information, write a quick outline on each one, boil it down to a page, have these 3 pages for the 3 books on this industry. I would promise you that you're going to be as educated, if not more so, than most of the people who work in that industry.
Right.
You'll understand the challenges, you'll understand the problems, and then set your mind to figuring out how to solve those challenges and problems. And that's as easy as some background research on Google.
Right.
Guess what? You're up to speed. It may not be perfect, may not be flawless, but I guarantee that if you had to go to an interview, you could speak intelligently about it.
Correct.
Right? Don't settle.
Right.
don't settle.
Right.
And if you can't see a way, find somebody who can give you a how-to roadmap on how to do it. And everybody who really achieves in life almost invariably writes a book on here's how I did it.
Right.
Because they feel the need to give back, right? Like Chuck Feeney.
Yeah.
So those are the takeaways.
Yeah.
Right?
He sounds
Don't
like
settle.
a great man.
It's
I've never, heard his name till you brought
You
it
don't
up.
even hear about him in business schools.
That's crazy.
That's crazy to me, that you don't hear about this man in business schools.
You know, what's crazy too is, both of you and I have been through TAPS class, and, we're approached with these veteran business classes that they have now out for, as you're transitioning, like, please join us in how to start your own business. And they're all, directed towards military members. And his name's never mentioned.
Yeah.
And he sounds like he could have, created that model for veterans starting their business. So it's just, it's weird.
If he was still alive, he should be giving a master class, on a master class for sure. So,
and we all can think duty-free stations. I know I can, because that's where you get your perfumes, your feel-good alcohol, it's
a fun system, and it was a simple idea to start, and he just did it and duplicated it and duplicated it and duplicated the same idea over and over and over and over again. And it was a very simple concept.
Where was the first? Do you know where the first one was created? Like the first actual duty-free station?
Duty-free shop, I believe, was in Honolulu International Airport.
Okay.
Because what they were trying to do is they're trying to capture the money associated with the expansion of the Japanese economy once it actually rebounded post-Reconstruction, because Japanese tourists, Japanese were leaving in droves to actually be tourists.
Yeah.
And that blew up Southeast Asia, which he had experience with because he learned Japanese when he was in Japan.
Gosh.
Not like me, who was an idiot. I don't want to learn Japanese. That's so stupid.
Yeah.
I was only there for 7 months, but Chuck Feeney probably would have been speaking the language by that point. And I was silly, but because he needed to talk to people, he understood the fundamental of that. So absolutely brilliant, man.
Amazing.
Highly recommend everybody read that.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Spotlight Podcast. And I just wanted to take a second to ask you who you think should be interviewed on the show. Who do you think is out there that's just absolutely crushing it that the veteran population needs to hear from? That's what we want to hear from you. Send us your suggestions to spotlight@thezenveteran.com. That's SPOTLIGHT @thezenveteran.com. Thanks again for listening.